Welcome to the Lighthome Sustainable Design podcast series. We talk with the architects and builders about green design and homes that really suit the way we love to live. It's Amanda Faulkner here, and today I'm talking with Lighthome Design Ambassador and architect Ed Ewers, but about something different, one of his own projects, and it's a dual occupancy in Geelong. Now, Ed, before we go any further, for people who don't know, what is a dual occupancy?
Dual occupancy is really two dwellings on the same site. Usually they're connected, but not necessarily.
In this instance, is this a vacant block that you saw, or was there something already there? Just describe what it was that you saw initially.
No, it's a suburban block. It's been vacant for 30 years. Not sure the history beyond that. But it's in suburbia, it's flat as a pan, and it's about 400 square metres.
Okay, and so do you have to subdivide it then to put these two dwellings on it?
The first thing you do is get a planning permit for more than one dwelling on the lot. Then you build them, and then if you choose to subdivide them, which is giving you the opportunity to sell them separately, the subdivision takes place at the end of construction.
Oh, really? Okay. So you saw this block of land, and what have you designed for it? Because we're at the very early stages of this project, aren't we? Not a sod has been turned at this point. We're really just at the design has been completed. So what does the design look like?
Okay. The area, just to give you a bit of a heads up, the area was probably developed. The neighbourhood was probably developed in the 50s. And it's that traditional sort of 50s post-war boom home on quarter-acre blocks on the edge of Geelong. But in the last, say, less than 10 years, the area has undergone a fair bit of gentrification, and interestingly and pleasingly, there's been more emphasis on contemporary design, and there's been more emphasis on higher density, which is probably what attracted us to that area. So what we're trying to do is something that's obviously it's a development, so it has to make money, so it's got to stack up, but also that looks quite contemporary and demonstrates good modern living principles for medium density.
And so just before we get into how it actually does demonstrate those modern living principles, for the homes that haven't been gentrified yet, that are surrounding this particular block, what do they look like? What do these post-war homes look like?
Yeah, sure. Tiled roofs, cream brick, sort of triple fronters, large land or gardens front and back, driveway up one side, 3 or 4 different housing stock types, generally all single level, family homes of that era.
Okay, and so then yours will be quite a counterpoint, I imagine, to that, and we'll look at the images for that in a moment, but just describe how you've approached this from a design perspective then.
Well, I suppose the first thing to look at was to fit the homes on. The site's 14 metres wide, and we want to get 2 reasonable size homes across that frontage. The other challenge is that the front yard faces north, and obviously best design principles are to get living spaces and even outdoor spaces that interact and receive that good northern aspect. And in fact, that was the biggest challenge for council. The planning department fundamentally opposed our original idea of embracing the front yard as the main outdoor space, and in fact having the living rooms facing that. But at appeal, I managed to convince them of the merits of doing so. So what we've done is we've staggered the front yard. There's a low section on the street without a fence, which is sort of typical of a street frontage. But then we have a fence and a garden courtyard, which is enclosed and then opens straight into, through sliding doors, big doors, into the main living space.
And so sorry, just to leap in there, what was the
Yeah.
basis of their initial objection? I mean, I understand you were ultimately successful, and I can see the reasons why it
Mm.
makes good sense to do what you've done. But why did they oppose that?
Um, Wood ducks. The, look, what they feel is that a home should have what they call private open space, or in fact, often they call it secluded open space, and that's an area where you can sunbake or do whatever you choose, and your privacy is respected through the planning guidelines. Um, that's all well and good, but in my opinion, there's no point doing that if it's on the south-facing end of a lot where it's just missing out on all the opportunity. They didn't see that. They said, look, the living space should be at the back of the house like it always is traditionally and open to a south-facing backyard. I managed to convince them otherwise. Part of their probably flipping was that they accepted there was still a large garden at the rear of the block, which I guess where all privacy is protected.
Okay.
But I just had to say to them the merits of passive design and to tell them that here's an opportunity to think beyond tradition and just try and soak up the north sun.
So if the, I guess primary living areas are at the front, as you walk through the house, what then is towards the rear?
Um, well, the planning's pretty simple. You have driveways down the outside boundaries, separate driveways down the outside boundaries. Then you have a two-story building which is split down the middle that's centred on the lot. As you approach the home, obviously there are these front courtyards that we've actually designed, and we see them as being permeable, so they're lawn as well as a little bit of deck, built-in barbecues, and still reasonable privacy. Then you enter the home into an open living space, and as you go through the back of the home, then there's open living and meals, a kitchen, then a laundry which is accessed immediately adjacent to the garage, and then behind that a powder room and a third bedroom on the ground level. And in the living space there's obviously a stair that goes up, and there are two quite generous bedrooms and two bathrooms upstairs.
And so if the block's 14 metres wide, so presumably each half has got 7 metres, and you've got
Yes.
a driveway down each side, then
Yes.
what are the houses? 5 metres wide, something like that?
Yeah, not quite, in
Yep.
fact. Yeah, they're about 4,600 for each dwelling.
So is that a challenge for you from a design perspective?
Oh, look, it is, but it's more a challenge to, I think, probably it's a challenge for that location. Inner city Melbourne, we work on, or Sydney for that matter, but in Melbourne, we work on homes down to 3.6 wide internally because that's the traditional row home or terrace home. In, regional areas or traditional new estates, obviously, that is something new and something that I guess the market audience has to accept.
And so in terms of that width, presumably then trying to keep, I don't know, wall thicknesses as thin as possible in order to not soak up any footprint unnecessarily was something that you considered, was it?
Oh, for sure, for
so
sure.
how did you approach that then?
The entire home will be stud framed. Obviously, there's a fire rating issue down the party wall or the central wall that divides the two dwellings, but that can be done using lightweight material as well. And then we just used a combination of wall claddings direct to the stud work rather than having a brick veneer, which takes up 250 mil instead of about 100 mil. So that's 150 mil or 6 inches you put back into the living space.
Which may not seem like a lot, but actually adds up to a fair bit of square meterage when you put it over that kind of area, doesn't it?
Yeah, and not just the square meterage. It actually helps. 150 mil in a terrace home is really significant in terms of sense of space and outlook. So yeah, it's pretty important.
And so what were the lightweight materials that you've selected for the exterior, for argument's sake?
Yeah, the exterior. clearly we wanted the building to read as one building, but also as two. So there's quite a common uh, design, quite a common aesthetic to it all. What we've done is we've used Hardy's matrix, Scion matrix panels as a feature in a two-tone colour pattern around the entire first floor front cantilevered rooms, and that's really prominent and striking, and sort of sets up the identity of the homes. And then on the lower levels and towards the rear, they're going to be clad in normal cement sheet and some stria, which is another Hardy's sort of horizontal or horizontal cladding with a shadow line profile. And then the front entries have a little bit of dressed timber siding just to soften them up at the entry.
And so the cantilevering of the upper story, does that, and presumably because that's at the front, so that's facing north, does that help to provide some of the overhang to protect against summer sun? Is that part of why you've done that, or I'm just
it achieves that. It also gives us a little bit more space to fit the stair in upstairs. But yeah, it gives articulation to the building form, so it's something that just helps the general appeal or an appearance from the street. We've cantilevered at the front and put a balcony off the master bedroom, and that was deliberately to provide sunscreening from the harshest summer sun, and also, as I say, by cantilevering upstairs, we gain a little bit more floor area.
And so, building out of lightweight materials, or using a lightweight construction approach, that obviously had an impact, as we've talked about, on the footprint. But does it help build these homes any quicker than if you'd done it with masonry, or if you were going to do it with masonry? Are there any kind of cost and time savings there?
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. Straight away, you've eliminated a trade, so you're not bringing a new trade, which is usually a time issue, and time is money. Laying bricks at a higher level is not a cheap option by comparison to any form of sort of broadsheet cladding, and our scaff time or our scaffold time ought to be quite a bit less using this method.
And so what about, you've talked about incorporating passive solar design principles in the home, but are there any other sort of particular sustainability considerations that you had when you were approaching the design?
I think the whole design is based around opening up to the north, which is somewhat contrary to a typical housing development where people see you open up to your backyard, regardless of which way it faces. So by embracing these little courtyards on the street and having the principal bedroom and the principal living spaces facing north, I think that's probably the most sustainable aspect that actually drove the entire design.
And so you were initially going to build this project yourself, weren't you? But that's not happening now. So you've sold this as like a DA approved project. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the case. Look, just time constraints and focus on the office is more important. And as much as I'd love to build these myself, it would never get done to the level that I would expect.
But you're going to retain some involvement, aren't you?
Yeah, we were approached by a developer who was introduced to us, and he liked them immediately. We got on well, so we managed to sell the land and the design to him, and in fact he has now engaged us to carry out some more service during construction, which is really terrific.
And gut feel, given that these will look a little bit different from what is surrounding them, how do you think they'll go from a selling point of view?
Look, I think they'll actually. I have a lot of confidence in them, and we picked that block of land because that is an area where certainly people are more open-minded to some contemporary architecture and to perhaps a new regime coming through. That the adjacent streets have reasonable examples of new urban infill, That, there are other parts of Geelong where I think these would not go down well because the areas are too conservative. But this area we have a lot of confidence in. Yeah.
Well, the very best of luck, and we look forward to following that project as it develops. So thank you, Ed.